Good morning, good day, good evening, greetings and salutations. Even though it's out of order, we still wish you a welcome, a hello. How you
What's
doing?
up?
The safe room featuring Security SideQuest. My name is Tristan and I am joined by the mysterious, mythological, myriad type of person when it comes to IR response. And yes, did I use that right? Maybe, maybe not. I'm going to build these M's, Russ.
Okay.
By the end, we're going to have about 100. So I hope you're ready for that. It's going to be a
Nope,
long
not-
episode.
Okay.
Just like we have 100 plus people joining us today. And thank you for joining. Take your time out today to watch us as we talk about something fun, something epic. But first, we take the pause dramatically and say, again, my name is Tristan Waddy, and I'm from the professional services team of AWS, where we help accelerate customers' journeys to the cloud in a secure manner. And Russ, where are you from?
I'm from the customer incident response team, and we help get you back to baseline.
Yes, and I have to zoom in because it's incident response, right? And that's what we're talking about today. But thank you. If you're joining in, feel free to put in the chat where you're joining in from. And if you feel like taking it a little bit further, another step beyond what we usually talk about, what is your favorite fruit? That is another thing I would like to see come through in the chat. And Russ, controversial topic on fruit. What is your stance? Where do you go?
So I was thinking about trying to be purposefully controversial and say tomato because, like pizza and pasta and all those things. But I was like, you know what? Forget it. I'm going to go with the real answer, which is strawberries.
Strawberries. Nice. It's a summery choice, right? You could have a strawberry shortcake. You could have a strawberry salad, all those good things. But for me, I was going to go a little bit more along the dragon fruit route just because, hey, I'm an adventurer, so I like something that has dragon in the title. Anything that goes.
I was going to say it's just because of the dragon.
Yeah, it just fits, right? I was going to say, blueberries and apples, but I'm just like, no, dragon fruit. No, really. Dragon fruit. That's it. And as we continue on, feel free to put in the chat what else do you consider a fruit. But today, Russ, what are we talking about?
Today, we're going to go over incident response. Gotta love it. So if you missed out last week, don't worry. You can still watch the recording, but we did go over implementing quantum safe security, which we were trying to take a theoretical topic and give you actual actionable steps to take. This time, it's straight, tactical, IR, hands-on, getting kind of into the weeds. So this one is much less theoretical and a lot more of the hands-on.
Yeah, and it's funny enough that we went from quantum to incident response because if you think about it, it kind of fits, right? If you're going from the quantum side of like, how do I prepare my environment so 5, 10, 15, 20 years from now, I don't end up with an incident. But I think with that being said, what we can do is jump into a poll to say, hey, what's your incident response style? What is it? Are you more of the heavy armor tank with a thorough, methodical approach, or a dual wielding warrior, or a stealth archer, or a battle mage? I was going to say battle mage. Russ, where do you lie?
I'd probably go with dual wielding warrior because I'm honest about myself. I do tend to go in pretty fast and aggressive. But that's, to me, that's kind of sometimes just the nature of incident response. I think there's times and places that all of these are appropriate. But especially when I'm just coming into a situation, usually I'm just going to go in, okay, what's going on? What's happening? What did we see? What do we need to find? Start kind of just jumping right into it. And usually you'd want to make sure that you're following your incident response plan. Usually the people that come and see me, don't have an incident response plan. So I'm kind of just going in and doing my best to figure out what's happening, what's going on, and, you know, take stock of the situation. And, you know, usually I go in, you know, a little aggressive.
Yeah, just script everything. Script, done. Throw up this instance. Oh, backup recovery. And say hello. Ari, how's it going? Favorite fruit? Apples. Good choice. Apples. Yeah. I always get too many apples when I go apple picking. So I hear you on that one. And for my approach, I think I'm more of a battle mage. Depending on the situation, I take that hybrid approach, right? And feel free to put 1, 2, 3, or 4 in the chat, and we'll see your poll results. But for me, it kind of is that fast, stealthy, careful, thought out approach, because you don't want to make the wrong move, and you want to make sure that you're following your IR plan. But spoilers for what we're going to say later. I think, yeah, hybrid approach is a good one. But digress a little bit.
That does bring up a good point, though, because you were like, oh, you know, sometimes you got to be careful and analytical. You can move fast and aggressive if you have an incident response plan written out, and then you just boom right through the incident response plan. So if you are careful and analytical before an incident occurs, then you can kind of take on an incident, especially in the beginning, fast and aggressive, and dive right in.
Yeah.
So that is a good point.
Or, you know, you could just type angrily at your keyboard too, right?
I mean, sometimes you kind of gotta.
It's part of it. And I think as we spoil kind of what we're diving in today with our theme, it's incident response. So we're going to dive into IR and think about what is the structural approach, especially when it comes to AWS and the different infrastructure, the shared responsibility model, the different pieces of the puzzle that we have to figure out and put together, along with making some, let's say, AWS recommendations when it comes to how do I handle incident response? What detection tools do I need? What AWS services, automated playbooks? Where do we go from that? And kind of tying all that back to something like maybe a framework of the NIST variety, something along those lines. And I would say if all these words I'm saying in the specific order sound like something vaguely familiar that you don't really understand 100%, maybe what we can do to help you along is take that step back, think about it, and maybe bring in some extra help, some extra wisdom, some people who may be considered sages. I think that's what we need to do today, Russ. Let's get everybody applause from the other side of the internet. And welcome to the stage, Rahul and Keerthana. All right, we're going to talk about some IR. How's it going today?
Hey, how are you all?
Doing well, right? We talked about some very important things so far, which before we get to any of the incident response stuff, we have to ask and pose this question to our great sages. What's your favorite fruit?
I love an exotic fruit, so I'm gonna say mangosteen, purely because I think I've consumed probably about 1 kilo of that over the last couple of weeks. Only because it's the season right now, and you don't really get it otherwise. But yeah, strange one.
I like it. Now we're all.
Yeah, I'll keep it very simple though. I come from a tropical country, very hot, so I like watermelons. They help reduce the temperature in the body, very hydrating.
Nice. Go for hydration. See, that's something I didn't consider when I just looked at the name and picked that fruit. See, both of you have such good fruit choices. And I think you also have some good incident response choices. But first, where are you coming from in the AWS world? What is your positions? Feel free.
I was going to say, shall I let Rahul start, and I can just say +1 on that because we're in the same team. Yeah, I'll go.
Okay, do it.
So we're both. So I'm a security and compliance solutions architect at AWS, and primarily the role is to basically act as sort of an advisor to our various different customers different industries, and to really be sort of that advisory point in terms of identity and access management or threat detection, incident response, data protection, etc. So yeah, we help our customers really better their security posture.
Yep. +1.
I'll say it for it.
Easy job.
Like ditto.
Yeah.
Yes, and thank you for sharing, and thank you for joining us today as we talk about the great concept of incident response and IR. And I think another question to start off, because fruit was important, but when you think of incident response, what's the first word that comes to mind for you?
For me, it would be logs, 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 and logs.
I was going to say calculated, just because of the amount of thought that goes into the process and the different steps that you'd have to take.
It's fun. It's interesting approach. We have logs and calculated. So all parts of an IR plan. We're going to just keep dropping IR in here. But so, Russ, what is the first word that comes into your mind?
Actually, I'm going to go the opposite and go chaos. Because no matter what, it is still going to be controlled chaos. So, but you can, like it was said, control the chaos, be prepared for the chaos, and do your best to kind of turn that chaos into a plus for your organization.
Nice. And I guess I'll go the opposite of you. And first word that pops in my mind is fun, right? Because that's what everybody's going to have, right? Some fun. No? Russ,
Not
you don't
at
have
all.
fun with incidents? No? All right.
Well, okay.
I wish.
Fun because I enjoy it, but it's not a fun process for people that are going through an incident, for sure. But that's also like something that you have to keep in mind as well when you're doing your incident planning. Is it's going to be stressful. A lot's going on, and you're concerned about saving potentially your business or your organization. So
And
but fun works too.
Yeah, fun works, and you love chaos, so I think they go together. But if we take that step back, right? So how do we start off with the fun? I think it comes to preparation, right? That's kind of the starting point for this. So I'll start with Keerthana. What is the foundations for success or fun, depending on how you look at it?
Yeah, sure. So I guess if we take a step back and sort of set the scene, if there's sort of viewers who aren't aware of the whole process to start off with anyway. So imagine you're living on a street. It's pretty insecure. You own a lot of expensive things. Some of the things that you might think of are, shall I have a security guard to look after the, expensive things? Shall I install a CCTV camera? Shall I just, hide those expensive things in a safe somewhere in the house that's completely hidden? So those are some actions that you can take before something happens, or in other words, sort of proactive measures. But then what happens if, somebody bypasses all these measures, gains access? Those are those reactive measures. So putting it into sort of a digital sense, incident response is really that process of handling that incident all the way from the start to the end. And so that's how I sort of think about it in terms of a visual sense to help picture it. But, talking about sort of incident response in general and putting it in the sense of AWS incident response, I guess we often refer to 3 areas. So you've got your preparation, you've got your operations, and you've got your post-incident activity as well. So I'll touch upon those slightly, but I think Rahul and I dive into sort of certain elements later as well. So in the preparation sense, this is, where your incident response team is really preparing to detect and to respond to incidents. And this could be something like enabling the appropriate detective controls, making sure, the team has the right access and they have the right access to the right tools and to the right services. And also making sure that, there's playbooks in place. So whether it's either manual or even automated, they are in place, and, the team knows how to use it as well. And the second one being operations, which we'll go to in detail. But really that's sort of referring to, where the actions of responding and remediating security incidents actually take place. And then you've got your post-incident activity, right, which is basically okay, something's happened, you've got the outcomes of your security events. How do you improve your response from this time to the next time as well? So I kind of see it as, across those 3 different elements.
Yeah, and I think it's very important to consider all those facts that you just laid out. And some people overlook the people and processes and technology pieces of that, right? Because they often like, oh, let me just use this tool and I'm good. And it's like, well, there's some personnel, considerations that come into that as well, right? You want that balanced approach when it comes to all those 3 things. Like, kind of call it trifecta, because all of it plays into, hey, simple things. Does your security team require specialized AWS knowledge? Do they have it? It's often a question is asked because you may have a customer that is multi-cloud and on-prem as well, and they might know IR by the book based on this wide purview of their environment. But when it comes to specific items, maybe it's something that may have been overlooked.
Yeah, this is it. Exactly. When like you mentioned, the people, process, and technology aspect, and anytime you sort of hear a security conversation, it always really comes into play. And exactly like you said, within your organizational structure, there could be so many people who are responsible or who need to be kept informed as well. So ranging all the way from sort of HR or even, legal as well. And in terms of the training as well, the right people have to be trained up in the right technologies. So all plays a big part.
Yeah. And I would say, when it comes to this, what are your thoughts when it's training up individuals in a particular, let's say, methodology approach, right, to incident response in the AWS environment? Should we learn more about the tools, or should we think about AWS as a whole? What kind of approach? If I'm just a stakeholder figuring out IR, as we'll get to in a little side quest in a little bit, spoilers, but where do we go first?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And actually, I was thinking about this in terms of our own team. We don't really do this within our own team because we're purely sort of advisory, right? But if I were to sort of think about it in terms of, like you said, like as a stakeholder, I guess there are loads of different ways that you could sort of mimic the situation or run sort of simulations using maybe some kind of real world, security event scenarios, and really mimic the various different tactics, techniques, procedures that somebody could use in the event of a cyber event. So, for example, if you could run these simulations in the form of sort of game days, we host quite a few game days at AWS, don't we, on various different topics as well. Not necessarily, for incident response in particular, but just in any sense. And you can basically just sort of simulate this and involve everyone, any stakeholder that could be involved in this kind of a real-time situation, and sort of role play it to see what you would come up with, some of the discussions that would come based off of this, and really sort of have the sort of game plan when it comes to, okay, this has happened, what would you do next? So I guess some of the ways could be sort of game days. I think there's also other activities. You've got PowerPoint, team exercises, red team exercises, stuff like that.
Yeah, you could do some tabletop exercises, some threat modeling to, first actually identify what resource do you want to actually protect, and how critical they are to your business, and then you start planning your IR, capabilities depending on what you want to protect.
Yeah, and I think that's a good question to pose to the chat. Is how do you sharpen your IR blade? Right? We talked about game days and tabletop exercises, but how often do you do it? And when you think of that, what do you advise customers when it comes to that? Is it once a quarter, once a week? What is kind of the general response?
Is there a general response? I wonder if it depends on the organization.
Yeah, I think a lot of that would rely on your regulatory requirements. So there are customers in specific industries who might want to do this on a more regular basis than other customers. So I would say it's something that's specific to industry, specific to customers. But doing it at least once biannually or at least annually is a recommended approach.
Right. And within that approach, I think it kind of goes down to what are some of the phases we have to consider, right? Because if we do a tabletop exercise, now I understand the people, the processes, the technology. Now what is the next step after that? And kind of pose that question to you, Rahul, is what do we have to think about when it comes to a phased approach?
So can you explain that to me again? Phased approach.
Yeah. So if we are looking at maybe more of the operational side of the house, right? So we start to get into maybe detection, analysis, containment, the actual phases of going what goes into a tabletop. So what is your thoughts on that?
If you could just hold that question for a while, because we will be talking about all of those phases of IR. So maybe that'll answer the question. Yeah.
Okay.
Let's jump into that right now.
Okay.
Do you?
Shall we start off with like what operations are?
Yeah.
So as Kat was mentioning, operations is the place where you actually perform the remediation of the actual events. So operations can comprise of 5 phases. First one being alerts or detection, next being analysis, containment. It then goes on to your recovery, and then goes what happens after the incident, right? So we'll start jumping into individual all of these phases and talk a little bit about what AWS has to offer for all of these, and talk a little bit about some of the best practices that we follow as well, right? So from a detection perspective, so an alert is the most basic thing for a detection, right? So an alert can be a security event. It can either be a notification that's sent to somebody on a Slack message. It could be a ticket that's raised because something went wrong within a system, or it could be a security finding that is generated from a security automation tool or an EDR or any security tool or a third-party partner tool that you're using, right? So within AWS, we have multiple tools which perform this detection capability. The first one that comes to my mind is AWS Config. So with Config, you can track changes to resources in your AWS account. Say, for example, if you have an S3 bucket, which has been made public, AWS Config can check if any configuration change has been made to this S3 bucket and send a notification or an alert via SNS to inform you about this particular activity. Right. Similarly, we have certain other tools like GuardDuty, which can perform not just this deterministic way of detecting misconfigurations, but also a more ML-based approach where it looks at baseline activity of an account, of an IAM user, of other resources like S3 buckets, RDS instances, and then gives you an alert based on if something looks like has been performed outside the baseline of that resource, right? So that would be your detection phase. So now let's move on to the analysis phase. So analysis is where you actually determine whether an alert was a true positive or a false positive, right? So any detection or any alert may not always require you to go the entire life journey or the entire journey of the IR plan. Some of them may not be a very high priority thing. Say, for example, you have a test environment, and if an alert is generated for a test environment, maybe that's not something which is your priority, right? Whereas if something is happening in your production, then that becomes your more top priority at that point, right? So in the analysis phase, what you do is you'll be looking at what the alert was, what are the parameters that you are able to capture from the alert, like what was the resources involved, who was the IAM user, or who was the IAM role that led to this particular alert. Were there any changes made to policies around the time when the alert was generated? Things like what was the user agent that was used, what CloudTrail activity happened around this time. So to perform all of these analysis, while detection tools like Config, GuardDuty, Inspector, Macy do help, but there's one very important tool that is required to perform this analysis, and that is CloudTrail. So CloudTrail is one place where you can identify what actually happened around when the alert was generated, and that on a lot of times gives you the answer of what might have actually gone wrong and what actually led to that event from happening.
Yeah, and I think that is a very good point. Is often when you're looking at this 5-phase approach, one thing is IR plan, make sure you have something for each one of those phases, because to your point, looking at something like CloudTrail and the logging that goes behind it, is everybody going to parse the logs the same way? Are we going to leverage another tool in conjunction with CloudTrail? Like think of Athena and running queries against a certain set. And then just the simple processes. If we get to the phase of, hey, we have a resource that may have a rootkit or something along those lines, how do we isolate? Do we go to a security group, a NACL, isolated VPC? Do we shut down the instance? Right? All these type of things go into that approach that you were mentioning, right? And understanding the tool set. So you mentioned stuff like guard duty and maybe config, and it's probably a detective tool of the inspector variety, right? I named 2 just for the spoilers, but I think all these things, you like the subtle hints, right? But I think it's all important parts of the puzzle. So question, how do you get to that baseline? So you're mentioning all these different components and tools that you can use and kind of the detection mechanisms. So if I am a stakeholder, I'm going to put on my stakeholder hat, we need to put some AI into this and figure it out. How do I detect anomalies? How do I create baselines with AI? Because why not?
So from a stakeholder perspective, the way I would be thinking is I would like to start small. Start with the fundamentals. What are the core things that I want to protect, and what are the best tools available for protecting this? Right. Of course, detective controls are good, but nothing can beat preventive controls. So I would start applying preventive controls wherever possible to ensure that the incident does not occur in the first place at all. Right. So I'll start with that as my fundamental approach. Apply proactive controls first, and then to cover the ground further, start applying the most important detective controls, like protecting your S3 buckets, protecting your most IAM users or IAM roles, protecting your root users, protecting your root credentials, something like that.
Yeah.
If I have to apply AI on that, that's a nice question. Can we rely on answers generated by AI for such for such controls?
Well, it's interesting because when it's often, we need to do incident response, and then they're trying to combine with AI, and then usually some of the conversation goes to, let's look at the existing services, right? Like you mentioned guard duty. There's some generative AI. Well, there's some artificial machine learning pieces built into guard duty, for instance, or detective, right? Where you can do the different groupings that based on, hey, this weird thing happened here, and then this other thing weird happened here. Let's group this together, right? So I think those are some of the conversations we can have with stakeholders as well, right? I don't know if Russ, do you see that from your side where it comes from like the incident response is just like, hey, how do we figure out what's going on? Let's leverage some of the existing tools.
Yeah, definitely. You see that a lot. You also see, some services that actually do that. I do know that the auto triage capability for the security incident responder, like that is using some level of AI and ML to be able to kind of parse out those false positives at a hopefully better rate to be able to drive down those alerts. So that way the alerts are kind of more efficient and less so, getting all spun up for a false alert, having to go into the analysis and the operations phase and going into the analysis and doing your triage and so there's some stuff like that I've seen, and definitely even a push for things like automated run books, and I think we'll talk about some of the automation later, but just in general, there's always a push for getting the most out of your responders. And being able to supplement them with tools that, even if the AI isn't necessarily perfect 100% of the time, at least it's decreasing the amount of manual work that the responders will have to do. So even if it's just pointing them in the right direction, that's still like a net add for our responders. So
yeah, exactly. And I think one of the other questions I pose is, first, answer, we playing Skyrim in here? Maybe. Thanks for that question.
I
And
think most people are probably not playing Skyrim right now.
yeah, well, if you're one of the people who got one of the copies after 10 years later or something like that, because it keeps getting released. But I digress. And then Locks, I see your question and no comment and no response on that. But thank you for asking questions. And Cyborg, actually, that's always a great word just to say. It's actually.
Yeah.
Thank you for that question. So if we go along the lines, if we're playing a certain game of the Sky variety, what would be in your quick access menu when we're thinking of detection tools? So I'll pose this question first to Keerthana. If you had to pick one or two services from detection, what would be in your quick access that you'd be like, I press 1 and this pops up?
I think Macy, just because I've been working with it quite a lot recently. And I think it's really cool that it can just detect, PII, and it's useful in various different types of industries. They use it in different ways as well, which is quite interesting to see. So probably Macy, and the other one would probably be Guard Duty, just a standard.
Nice. And Rahul, what's on your
Yeah, I would go Guard Duty first and Security Hub, because I would like a more single pane glass view of my entire estate, and then of course Guard Duty with all its magic.
Nice. That's a nice 1-2 combo right there. And then Russ?
CloudWatch and Athena.
Okay.
For sure.
Nice. And it's funny because I feel like I have to say something different, because if I get, I'm like, what would be in my quick access menu? I'll go Detective and Inspector. How about that? Right? Nice 2 right there. Let's see. And I think with that being said, we can kind of get into something of legend, something that helps us to explore the boundaries of knowledge. And what may that be? Well, it might be something of a side quest, because as side quest legend has it, and we'll put on some dramatic music for it, right? We'll put on the acoustics,
the tavern music.
Yes, the tavern music as we go on our side quests. And thank you for joining in. I'll try and put it on my announcer voice, where one person, one engineer of the security variety has detected and responded to a security breach in their AWS environment. After successful containment of the initial incident, the team now needs to scale their IR processes, their capabilities, their thought processes. How do we do this? How do we say hello to Victor? So, starting off with this context, with this scenario, like a guard fighting a dragon for the first time.
You're gonna
Keerthana, I will pose this question to you. What would your team's most valuable lesson be from their first major incident?
Oh, good question. What would it be? We haven't done this within our team, so I'm really just thinking about what other organizations would be thinking of in this instance. I think to have sort of that good framework in the sense of a playbook, and whatever major incident that organizations come across, to have that noted really well so that anyone in the team can then pick it up again and go through it bish bosh bang the next time around.
And I think that is the perfect response, because as we bring up our side quest board, we can talk about is, hey, how do we go through this? And if this is your first time joining, side quest board is a visualization of our approach of protecting our AWS environment. If we spin it around, we say AWS, and that's what we're trying to protect. So we have our authenticated user here, and then we have a trio of individuals who are not. So if we're trying to map out a path to block said intruders and maintain authentication, I think part of what we already laid out is a very important part. A very important consideration is, hey, what do maybe the logs show? I think that was a key consideration that was mentioned by the team. So as you learn from your most valuable or major incident, looking through the logs, seeing what's going on, I think it's a good starting point. So if we are continuing to scale, what are some of the challenges? I think it's multiple AWS regions, and then accounts to protect, and inconsistent maybe login. So I pose this to our panel of esteemed people. What services may help us protect through this?
Do you want to go, Keerthana?
I'll have a think while you go.
So as for protection, I think we're looking at enabling guard duty. These kind of your basics. I know you're looking for a specific answer, but I'm going to go with the basics like backups, ensuring you have backups. Logging is enabled. Versioning if you're running S3. Stuff like that where you can actually, well, that's not really preventative. That's more recovery, but ensuring that you have those and that, you know, your backups are in a safe location where you always have access to them is preventative, because, you know, you're protecting yourself against ransomware. And if you do get hit with a ransomware, without having those backups, you lose all of your data.
And I think you bring up a couple of good points. And I think one of the questions, as we're still on our side quest, we start to figure out is kind of what services lead the charge of your incident response efforts.
Security Hub. I think Rahul kind of mentioned that to start off with. And so with, you know, Security Hub, you've got that whole one pane of glass where you can visualize everything coming in, your WAF logs, your, you know, Route 53, etc., all of the logs coming in. That can sort of trigger that thought process to then further go into research.
And I think you bring up a couple of good points, because we're trying to rush. And just like we don't see the side quest board, sometimes when you plan for things go off the rails. And I always bring up the point of Leonard Snart, where you make the plan, you execute the plan goes off the rails, and you try another one. Right? So if you're on our side quest and now we can't see a visualization, we're trying to think of all these AWS services. You know what the hard part is? Trying to think of all the AWS services we should be using. We should look at CloudTrail. We should do all these things. And we blacked out the board for a reason, because if you don't have something like a IR plan, this is what it looks like. You can't see the board. There's no visualization of what you're doing right, what you're doing wrong, and everything in between. So what we'll do is we'll hit a good old pause game button, and we'll take off the sound effects. And I call this Zach Morris timeout. And we'll take a step back and think, okay, what are the next steps that we can take? What do we have to think about? Because our solution was, hey, let's get some logging. Let's get some different mechanisms in place. And just like a good incident, you may lose a responder every once in a while to other incidents, right? So, hey, we throw, right? It's just like we have to figure it out. So as we continue on this path of understanding and trying to, let's say, build up our IR capabilities, I guess from a containment, eradication, recovery, we're in the recovery phase. We don't have a board. We don't have Rahul. Where do we go, Keerthana?
Well, we can start talking about the three different phases that you mentioned, right? Eradication, containment, eradication, and recovery. So in terms of sort of containment, it's important before an incident really overwhelms the resources or really massively increases sort of damage. So quite an essential part of containment as well is, I guess, the decision-making process, which I think one of you mentioned earlier as well, right? Do you shut down the system? Do you disconnect from the network? Do you disable certain functions? And so if you've already got all those sort of predetermined and written out in the form of a strategy or something, for example, then it makes it a lot easier to make those decisions on the spot. And also, for example, you know, the strategy for, I don't know, containing an email-borne infection, malware infection, could be quite different from a network-based DDoS attack, for example. And so having those different containment strategies for each type of major incident type can be super useful and valuable. And after that incident has then been contained, you might need to eradicate it, right? So that could be necessary to get rid of components of the incident, such as sort of detecting that malware, disabling sort of the breach, removing any unauthorized resources in general to bring it back to that initial safe state that we know of. And also during eradication, it's important to sort of identify all of those affected hosts within the organization so that it can be remediated. I see Rahul back. I think you've just joined back on. And there's a lot from being recovery as well, which we have recovered you, which is awesome. And within recovery, we've got sort of those administrators coming in, restoring those systems back to normal operations, confirming that, those systems are functionally normal, are functioning normally, and basically just remediating any vulnerabilities to prevent any similar incidents which might happen in the future as well. So those are those 3 parts to the operations cycle that we mentioned: eradication, containment, eradication, and recovery as well.
Yeah, and I think you bring up some very good points of, hey, how do we contain? How do we eradicate? And then how do we check? How do we verify the integrity of everything? Right? Because say we recovered Rahul from our save state. Is this Rahul operating at 100%? Do we know? We may not, right? But what are the mechanisms?
We don't even know it's Rahul himself. This guy, imposter, an AI imposter.
Yeah, verify it.
We recovered the host in the best way, right? We didn't plan this, wink, but it works with this topic because as you go through understanding, how do you know and how do you feel comfortable with your environment after an incident happens? That's a big question that people like to ask, especially when they're doing a report to follow up what happened and how did we recover? When did we recover? What was the mean time to recover and detect, and all those good metrics that we like to track? So I think one of the pieces that we can start to get into is, what did we learn? What are the lessons that we took away from this? And I asked the copy of Rahul, what are some of the lessons that we learned from recovering this?
Yeah. So, good one. So once we have had an incident, we have recovered from it, we are back to the state of operation that we wanted it to be. The next step should be to identify what actually went wrong, right? So an incident should not just be left as an incident, but it should be treated more like something like a learning exercise, like a learning framework, where you have a set of questions that you answered, like what actually happened, are we missing out on any of the detective controls that we don't have in place? Why did this happen? Is it because of an accident that led to this event, or was it actually a malicious attempt from somebody from outside my organization? What are the resources that were involved? How do we prevent something like this from happening from going forward? What are we doing to prevent this? So there should be like a list of questionnaire that you answer to identify what went wrong. How fast did you detect the event? Did you have to be called by AWS abuse or somebody to inform you that? Because I'll share with you an interesting story. So I had a customer once who did not actually figure out that they were being attacked, but they actually had a DDoS attack, unless AWS actually called them up and said that, hey guys, your application does not seem to be operating 100%. Can you check if this is what you expect it to do? And then they realized that they were actually being DDoSed. So these are a few things that you need to do post-incident to identify what's happened. And once you know where the gaps are, you make a proactive approach to fill those gaps, implement additional steps in your playbooks if you want to identify what are the gaps, add recommendations for improving those gaps, and then of course do the continuous education of your teams on how to handle such threats, how to handle such events, because incident response is not a static thing. It's not something that you're done and it's dusted. It's something that will keep evolving over a period of time. It's something that you have continuously to ensure that if something is happening, then how do you recover from that in the most quickest way, and in a way that you get your business back the fastest.
Yeah. And you bring up some good points is how do we recover with lessons learned? And that's the thing, is if we just bring it back and then, okay, go about our business, then what's going to happen is it's going to affect the business again. It's going to impact the business again. So learning and updating playbooks and run books and things of that nature, because a playbook and a run book can always be tuned, especially when you try to incorporate all of the different pieces of feedback, because it may be something as simple of, hey, we got this incident in and I didn't know how to escalate this to the AWS team, right? I'm a customer, and what is the do I open a ticket? What do I do? How do I go about this? So I think it brings up a couple of different points. And Victor says feedback hub collections is a cause for many things. So lagging, poison the network of legacy devices, not recommended, like a 0 day. So yes, never recommended. One, legacy devices also equals tech debt, and tech debt equals not being in the run book because it's tech debt and it might have been from somebody else and we didn't update our playbook, and it steamrolls. It keeps going on and on, right? So what also goes on and on is the like and subscribe, and make sure you do that to the AWS channels. And shameless plug, that was like to do, right? A little bit. I've been practicing. Not really, but I have. So I think part of understanding, kind of bringing this together, is how do we figure out this thing called incident response? I think the easiest way to do that, or the most efficient way, is to read, right? Spoilers. But the second part is just understanding what's out there in terms of, hey, I have a bunch of pieces of different information I have to piece together in a specific manner that equals an IR plan. See, I inserted it throughout the diagram. But you can also think about it this way. You can go and have a knowledge quest. Nice animation. Knowledge quest, right? And how do you do a knowledge quest? Well, you kind of go through and you get some certifications, certificate knowledge, all that good stuff. But you can also join the safe room featuring Security SideQuest as we start to understand and break down leveled approaches. So if you're that beginning person, you are among the first watch. And what does the first watch do? Well, outside of just trying to make sure that, things don't happen on my watch, is also trying to figure out, if something does happen, how do I go about fixing that? And I think that's one of the main pieces of the puzzle. So as we jump in to today, I think a good starting part for L100, the first watch, toggle it off so we can see everybody. Hey, what is the AWS Security Incident Response User Guide? And I think this is a good part, and often recommended, is just going through and understanding, one, the terminology and concepts. When you're speaking on an incident, how do I know I'm speaking the right thing? How do I know if I am communicating properly, right? Keerthana went through containment, eradication, and recovery. What are those? Am I speaking to the right pieces? And I'll take this pause and say, how often, great sages, do you go to the incident response user guide to kind of go through all these different items to refresh your memory?
Do you want the honest answer or the real answer? No, I'm really kidding. I think it's a great. I think all the AWS user guides are great, to be honest. So I do use them quite often. But also as a supplement to this, which I think is also referred in this user guide, is the NIST Computer Security Incident Handling Guide, which is also an amazing resource. And well worth a read.
Yeah. And Rahul, I'll let you
Yeah.
answer.
The last time I visited this guide was this morning, so that's how often I do it.
Breakfast and
Yeah,
response.
I would say it's always before I'm speaking to a stakeholder about incident response, and that's at least a couple of times a month. So I just go back to see if there are any changes, we have any new recommendations, any new white papers added, or any new links added into this documentation which I can use. So at least once or twice a month for sure.
I think it's updated quite often as well. I mean, there's always new resources that are added on.
Yeah. And I'm kind of biased towards the security section of the guide as well, for obvious reasons. But I think other pieces of documentation of just going to something Like, think about historically, what documentation was out there? Hey, the calf, right? What was this? And you see the date on this. I bring this up for a particular purpose, right? This white paper is for historical purposes. Sometimes you have to dive in to see why things are the way they are today, right? Because you often go to the latest and the newest thing, and you're like, okay, this works for my environment, but what was the history of that? And sometimes when you work through the history, you start to understand from a L100 layer how everything kind of evolved, right? I always go back to DOS computing, right? Where you're like, okay, I want to spin up a game, so I have to go to command line. I want to. Kids these days, they just turn it on, right? I had to go into command line, but it's understanding these concepts, right, that help you build up, right? I know I sound like the old man wags finger at cloud, but how going there and
Back
starting,
in my day.
starting to build up, right? Eventually, it gets to a point where you level up, right? You become a city guard, right, from a first watcher, and what do? Well, you may go to something like, hey, what is Security Hub? We mentioned that on this call a couple of times, right? How do I do that in a multi-organization environment? How do I take care of the logging? How do I do something like respond to DDoS events, right? These are all things that City Guard and L200 start to get to, right? And you often see a lot of different services that come with that. So as you're speed running and going through all these and figuring out what the SRA is, and I dropped this in casually, but it's not a casual read. It's actually a very long read and a very good read because it's been updated very frequently, especially when you AIML part of this. But I say all this to start to understand that you just don't become L400. You just don't jump up the ranks to an elite guard. You have to go through each one of these steps and read and experiment and see and experience. And then eventually you get to the point where you say, hey, let me do a workshop. Let me see and put some of my theory into practice. And when you look at incident response and the workshops, I would say, and I pose this question to our sages, when it comes to hands-on keyboard testing, what are your thoughts on it when it comes to IR and kind of figuring out the process from your experience? Man, I open that. See, it's just such a knowledge piece that they have to parse through their great sage wisdom.
I think all the workshops on Workshop Studio are really great, but in particular, I mean, this incident response workshop as well is, 1.5 hours is what it says. But I think there's so much more additional reading you can do alongside to supplement your knowledge as well in this sense. So if you want to get hands-on with, all the services that we spoke about, the Security Hub, the Guard Duty, Macy, etc., CloudTrail, etc. Workshop Studio is a great way to sort of get hands-on those services and just to play around with it.
Yeah, and in terms of education, I would say we have Kiku, I think it's called, the portal for learning about these services. So if you want to watch video content, then maybe that's a good resource as well.
Yeah, and I also give a couple of plus ones, I guess plus 9,000. If you get that reference, 10 points to you. It's actually going through a scenario, right? Whether it be a tabletop exercise or something like the workshops, helps to build that experience that you need. So when something happens, you have the muscle memory already. Okay, I'm going to go to CloudTrail. I have these commands already. I know these different pieces. Because, Russ, how often do you just muscle memory going through an incident like, okay, I know this, and you just kind of see through and play 4D chess with your great incident response knowledge?
As much as I would like to say always and forever, never. Always use documentation, your manuals, your run books, automated run books, whatever you're doing. And the first time that you have hands-on with those tools should not be an incident. So you definitely want to be doing that before it becomes a problem. We also have things like, AWS Cert Toolkit for automating incident response preparedness in the workshops, shout out to Cert, whatever. And there's also specific event simulations. So like having ransomware on S3, crypto mining, IAM credential misuse. Like we had that all in workshops. So you can see and go through an actual simulation of an incident using the data that's prepared ahead of time and actually get your hands on and not, have to rely on, you can prepare yourself a little bit better. So that way, when you do have an incident, you're not just like, shutting down, just like, I don't know what to do. So for the most part, it's having an incident response plan beforehand. It's having the run books created, so that way you can just follow them during a stressful situation, or at least to get yourself started. Once you actually get into the attack methodology, everything's going to go out the window anyway. But for the most part, you can set yourself up for success, or at least to be more efficient in the beginning of an incident, just by doing a little bit of preparation.
Yeah, and often what we see with customers as they're going through a tabletop exercise is they have the general pieces of what they should do. But when you actually walk through, okay, then who do you call? Oh, I call this person. Oh, they have access to do this action? No, the other person has it, right? They start to see the chain of effect of, we have to have about 6 people in place before maybe we do isolation, as we talked about, for a security group, because it's not the networking team only. You have to have the account owner and the networking team, and then so on and so forth, right? You start to go through this kind of loop-to-loop, and you're just like, well, can we automate this away? And that's where some of the automation comes with some automated playbooks where maybe it takes care of all of that. You just get the alert that says, hey, this was taken care of. Investigate a little bit more, right? So I would pose this question to our great sages is, how often do you see automated playbooks being implemented into customer environments, or them starting to move towards that direction?
I think a lot of discussion now is around how to use automations not to provision resources as well as recover from such events. So I would say people want to remove the human element from provisioning of resources as well as in the remediation phase as well. So these discussions are very prevalent.
Yeah, absolutely. I think
because
sorry.
Yeah, because humans tend to make mistakes. So that's the reason.
Yeah. Just to add on to that, I mean, more so now, definitely. And as well, I think they're wanting to sort of see these automation examples referenced, so that is something that's easy for them to follow as well. So oftentimes we see sort of AWS samples, containing lots of these sort of reference architectures that customers can then also have a look at and implement their own version of sort of an automation solution.
Yeah. And I would say, as we have about 2 minutes, so the 2-minute drill. So closing thoughts. We'll start with Keerthana. What is your 20-second last thing you would want to say about incident response? And go.
Turn on CloudTrail in all regions, not just USC1, not just prod, everywhere. I think it's like free, was it no charge for 90 days for management events? So just turn it on.
Nice. So we have that wisdom. Rahul, you're next. 20 seconds. Go.
Yeah. Turn on guard duty again, not just in US East 1, but every region that you operate in, and filter findings, log everything.
Yes. Those are good pieces of information. And mine is personally just continue to build XP points. Level up yourself, right? And how do you level up? You do it 1 XP point at a time. You go out, you slay one wolf, another wolf, and then eventually, boop, level up. Same thing when it comes to understanding how to leverage some of the tools. And hey, I'm not familiar with Inspector. Let me go use Inspector or Detective or fill in AWS tool here and build up your knowledge. But Russ, what is your 20-second? No, I'll give you 5 seconds, Russ.
No, I need the full 20 seconds today.
No, 5 seconds.
No, so it's good, right? Because you guys get it. And the things that you guys are saying are perfect. I love it. So it's just good to have that on the show and be able to be like, see, I told you I wasn't lying. But my obvious takeaway is please create an incident response plan.
Yes.
And it's actually in theme to talk about that today. So
Exactly. I had to set it up for the last bit. And also, we have to say thank you to our great sages for joining us today. Rahul, Keerthana, thank you for sharing your wisdom and your knowledge. And share some of your aura that is illuminating off of you when it comes to IR. So, as always, have a great day. Keep on side questing. Keep building XP. Keep building aura. Until next time, the next episode, build an IR plan. Last time. Goodbye.